Hey there, welcome back. Tonight we're stepping into something a little complex and, honestly, a little smelly. We're talking about the medieval inn. Now, before you picture anything cozy or charming, let me reset your expectations. This was a place where exhausted travelers met suspicious stew, where ale flowed freely, and so did lice. It was loud, it was gritty, and half the time you couldn't tell if the noise upstairs was snoring or someone dying. Welcome to the ultimate test of hospitality, 14th century style. Before we jump in, hit that like button if you're into these weird little historical deep dives. And hey, if this is your kind of content, subscribe, but only if you really mean it. I'm not here to trick the algorithm. Leave a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing the little global community we've got here. All right, dim the lights, maybe crack a window or turn on a fan for that gentle medieval ambiance, and let's drift back in time. The story doesn't begin with the innkeeper waking up. Not exactly. It begins with someone downstairs sneezing directly onto the floorboards beneath his bed. That's followed by a groan, a loud crash, and then the unmistakable sound of a chicken making its escape again. One eye opens. It's dark. Still dark, which in medieval timekeeping means it's either way too early or much too late. There's no middle ground when your clocks are roosters and gut instincts. He peels himself out of bed slowly like he's detaching from a particularly clingy loaf of bread, rubs his face with a sleeve that in theory was once linen. Now, it feels like someone wrapped a saddlebag in fatigue and regret. The bed isn't awful, just basic. Straw mattress slightly crooked. The blanket smells faintly of garlic and last week's ale. Kind of cozy in a don't question anything sort of way. Getting dressed is a process. First comes the tunic, then trousers. Then the hunt for a belt, which is eventually found hanging on a peg behind the door alongside a spoon, a candle stub, and a sock that definitely isn't his. But at this hour, asking questions is a trap. Don't do it. Downstairs, the common room is unsettlingly quiet. There's evidence of life, though. A tipped-over mug, a boot by the hearth, a man snoring underneath a table with the kind of confidence that says, I've done this before, and I'll do it again. The innkeeper tiptoes around him. Waking guests too early tends to lead to awkward, possibly sword-point conversations. He moves to the hearth, pokes the embers with the casual precision of someone who knows the price of firewood. The goal here isn't a roaring blaze, it's just not freezing to death. Last time, someone overdid it, a goose got roasted indoors. Feathers and all, nobody wants that twice. He sets a pot over the fire filled with whatever last night's stew has turned into overnight. No, not stew exactly. More like a suggestion of stew, but it's warm and it'll pass for breakfast. Outside, a mule brays in the distance. Hooves clomp. Early travelers. He sighs. The inn isn't elegant, it's not prestigious, but it's warm, it's full, it's alive. And most importantly, it's his. The day begins again. Breakfast at the inn. Breakfast here isn't a meal. It's more like a negotiation between what's technically edible and what's unlikely to kill you. The innkeeper ladles out a chunky spoonful of something into the pot over the fire. It doesn't have a name, but it does have a smell. Think boiled oats meets a wet boot that's been contemplating cabbage. Welcome to pottage. It's not a recipe. It's a medieval concept. Take yesterday's barley and turnips, now softer. Add some mystery meat from the goose that didn't quite get away. Stir. Add water. Heat. Repeat. It's like soup, if soup gave up halfway through. Bread is there. Present. As in physically, emotionally, it's somewhere else. Hard as a roof tile and just as chewable. The innkeeper cuts it carefully, not for presentation, but because he's already broken too many knives on this week's loaf. The guests chew slowly, either to aid digestion or to buy time to reflect on their life choices. Then there's the ale. Yes, ale for breakfast. It's not a cliché. It's survival. The water is dicey, the milk is for the Lord's cat, and tea is still centuries away from being trendy. Ale's the only drink that's been boiled, filtered, and fermented with enough desperation to be relatively safe. Even the kids drink it under supervision, of course. This is a reputable establishment. Guests start shuffling in, one by one. There's a merchant clutching his coin purse like it's his grandmother's ashes. A pilgrim who's still mumbling about blisters. And then, of course, the bard. There's always a bard. He asks for honey with his porridge as though honey hasn't been locked in a chest for the last 6 weeks. The barmaid Marjorie dances between tables with the elegance of a woman who's heard every bad poem a drunk traveler can invent. She refills mugs, dodges gropes, smiles through gritted teeth. By the end of breakfast, the air smells like smoked barley and regret. Bowls clatter onto tables. Stomachs are full. Spirits are lukewarm. Nobody's died yet. By medieval standards, that's a win. If there's one thing a medieval inn doesn't need more of, it's people. And yet, by mid-morning, they pour in like pigeons with luggage and with roughly the same attitude toward personal hygiene. First, through the door, a knight. Well, someone claiming to be a knight. He's got armor, technically, but it's mismatched, rusted, and tied together with what suspiciously looks like curtain rope. He announces that he demands a private room. He's got no coin, no manners, and smells like a horse that lost a bet. Behind him, a merchant's apprentice. Talks like he owns a shipping fleet, pays with buttons. Tries to haggle over the price of soup like the inn's running a 2-for-1 special on Tuesdays. Then comes the bard. Yes, another bard. Every inn has one, and this one's particularly loud. He never pays claims his songs are worth more than gold. Spoiler alert, they aren't. He plucks at a lute with only 4 working strings and sings a mournful tune about lost love and goat theft. Nobody asked for this. A monk wanders in next, nodding at furniture and blessing it like it's a room full of sinners. He declares he's fasting, loudly, while side-eyeing the bread. Within 10 minutes, he's eating said bread and explaining that technically it's not a sin if the loaf was already broken. By noon, the inn is a chaotic blend of smells, noise, and overlapping personalities. Someone's drying socks by the hearth. Someone else is sharpening a knife just a little too enthusiastically. A child darts between tables, being pursued by a goose with a personal vendetta. In the corner, 2 travelers argue over who gets the only stool that doesn't wobble. And through it all, the innkeeper moves like a man who's seen it all and refuses to be surprised anymore. He knows how this ends. By sunset, someone's going to fall asleep in their soup, someone will fall in love with someone they shouldn't, and someone, probably the bard, will challenge a piece of furniture to a duel. He wipes down the bar with a cloth that predates his will to live, gives a nod to Marjorie, who returns it with the subtle grace of someone who's already tired of your nonsense, and the day trudges forward. The powerhouse named Marjorie. If the inn has a soul, or at the very least a functioning brain, it's Marjorie. Early 20s? Possibly 30? Or maybe she just aged rapidly from repeated exposure to traveling poets and suspicious poultry. Her exact age, a mystery. Her authority, absolute. Marjorie doesn't run the inn on paper, but in practice, it's her kingdom. She glides through chaos with tray in hand, ducking spilled ale and swatting away unsolicited flirts with the speed of a battle-hardened barmaid. A drunken mercenary once tried to compliment her ankles. He woke up 2 days later with his boots nailed to the ceiling. She can take an order in 4 dialects, pour ale without spilling a drop, and insult a noble without technically committing treason. She's not rude. She's efficient. And in a building held together by splinters and prayer, she's the only person with actual authority. She knows which travelers will pay in coin and which ones are about to start bartering with seashells. She can smell a fake accent, spot a stolen ring, and instantly detect a complaint disguised as a flirtation. Even the monk, the loud one, knows better than to cross her. Marjorie is the unofficial patron saint of getting things done. Her day starts before dawn ends, long after the fire dies, and in between, she's serving stew, chasing children, bandaging skinned knees, and refereeing arguments over goats that technically don't belong to anyone. And yet, she never drops the tray. That's the magic of it. Everyone else might be tripping over each other, bumping into tables, or sleeping under them. But Marjorie, she's a storm wrapped in an apron, controlled, precise, terrifying if you cross her, and somehow impossibly kind if you don't. She doesn't need applause, doesn't want thanks. But if there's one reason this inn hasn't crumbled into stew-soaked oblivion, it's her. Lunch rush or low-scale war. Lunch at a medieval inn isn't a meal. It's a mild siege. It starts peacefully. The hearth is warm. The stew is well stew. Marjorie rings a battered iron triangle that signals food's ready. Then stampede. Guests emerge from corners you didn't know existed. A traitor vaults over a sleeping dog. The bard readies his lute like he's going into battle. Two farmers argue over who sat down first, despite there being plenty of empty benches. The innkeeper starts ladling stew, or pottage, or possibly an abstract interpretation of both. The ingredients are mysterious. Even divine forces might not know exactly what's in there. One guest asks if it's vegetarian. Another asks what vegetarian means. The innkeeper hears neither. Bread is thumped onto tables with the gentle grace of a dropped brick. Guests attempt to dip it in the stew to soften it, which mostly results in cracked bowls and failed dental experiments. One traveler trades his bread crust for a second mug of ale. It works. Marjorie, as always, moves through the chaos with that same 1,000-yard stare worn by battlefield medics and teachers of 7-year-olds. She refills mugs, distributes warnings, and maintains eye contact just long enough to neutralize any funny business. By the hearth, two guards try to outburp each other. A monk hums hymns between spoonfuls. And yes, the goat is back. Again. It seems to have a schedule. Lunch lasts roughly an hour. Not because of clocks, nobody's wearing one, but because that's how long it takes for someone to spill ale, accuse someone of cheating at dice, or attempt to sing with a mouth full of onion. Then it's over. Silence falls. Brief, eerie, until someone drops a spoon, and everything starts again. Lunch is done. Or rather, the stew is gone, the bread's been gnawed into submission, and the goat has once again been escorted out with a broom and a stern talking to. But this is the part innkeepers dread more than any sword-wielding guest or overturned ale barrel. Clean up. To the untrained eye, the common room just looks messy, a bit disheveled, maybe like a mildly chaotic tavern. To Marjorie and the innkeeper, it's a battlefield, an archaeological dig, a test of endurance. There are mysterious stains of various colors, piles of crusts, bones, spoons, and somehow a sock stuck to the ceiling. Onion peels are in places onions should never be. The tables are wiped down with the same cloth that's been used since the great ale spill of last Tuesday. It doesn't so much clean as smear everything into a glossy medieval glaze. The floor is swept, sort of, more like gently nudged. Debris is shoved under benches and into corners with the hope that gravity and denial will handle the rest. A boot is discovered under one of the stools. No one claims it. It's added to the growing pile behind the bar labeled "Possibly Belongs to Someone." Marjorie starts stacking dishes with the mechanical speed and dead-eyed efficiency of someone who's done this every day for a decade and would frankly rather be anywhere else. Each bowl is handled like a passive-aggressive message. Each spoon is judged. Guests who linger too long at their tables are given the look. You know the one. A glance so potent it once made a noble apologize and tip an entire silver coin. He was never seen again. The story has become legend. The stew pot is scraped clean. What's left inside is either fed to the pigs or reincorporated into tomorrow's stew. No one will notice. Or if they do, they won't say anything. In this inn, waste not, want not. Especially when the stew has stopped being a recipe and started being an evolving organism. The mugs are next. The innkeeper mutters something about washing them properly, but everyone knows they'll just get a casual rinse in the rain barrel out back. It's what he calls divine purification. There's a soaking bucket too, but at this point, it's mostly ceremonial. Eventually, the final crumbs are brushed from the benches, which somehow always end up more wobbly than they started. The room begins to resemble an inn again instead of the aftermath of a food-based riot. Marjorie straightens her apron. The innkeeper exhales. The goat is temporarily missing again, but nobody's looking too hard. Peace has returned. Kind of. But in a medieval inn, peace is never permanent. It's just a short breath between one disaster and the next. And somewhere, someone is already asking, when's supper? The door swings open again. Just as the last spoon is dried and Marjorie dares to take a sip of leftover ale, it happens. The door creaks open. New guests, new problems, new questions. First through the door is a traveler wearing an oversized cloak, a beard that could house small woodland creatures, and an expression that suggests he might write a very stern review on parchment. He marches up to the bar and asks, "Do you serve almond milk?" Silence. Immediate. Total. Somewhere in the corner, a stool gives out under the weight of collective judgment. Behind him, a young couple enters, clearly not married, based on how awkwardly they're standing and how much effort they're putting into not touching each other. They ask to see the room first. Marjorie points upstairs. It's wooden. It has walls. Doesn't leak in summer. Usually. Next comes a third guest, dusty, important-looking, and full of self-righteous confidence. He wants to know where the inn sources its candles, whether the stew is ethically prepared, and if the goat has been house-trained. Naturally, the goat sneezes on his boots. Then, as if summoned by chaos itself, a different bard strolls in. He offers to pay with a song. He strums his lute, hits 3 wrong notes, and launches into a ballad titled "The Lady in the Leaky Chamber Pot." He is asked to stop, politely, with a broom. The innkeeper watches all of this from behind the counter. He doesn't interrupt, doesn't argue, just smiles the way a man smiles when he knows Marjorie's got this, because she always does. And if there's one thing that fills an inn faster than rain, it's travelers with opinions, and they never show up quietly. Supper is served, kind of. Supper doesn't begin with ceremony. It begins with noise. Chairs scraping, mugs clinking, someone coughing theatrically to suggest they've been waiting for hours, even though they arrived 9 minutes ago and are still wearing their traveling cloak like a royal cape. Marjorie steps out from the kitchen with a pot. It's stew. Still stew. The same stew. Slightly reheated, a little thicker, a little more ominous. It's served with bread that's as hard as regret and possibly older than some of the guests. A traveler eyes his bowl. This tastes different than last night. Marjorie doesn't look up. It's the same. Oh, well, it's nice, they say quickly, because they like their cutlery and their ability to walk. The bard, yes, still here, offers to sing a song in honor of the meal. Marjorie ladles his stew with a bit more force than usual. He gets the message. At the hearth, 2 merchants debate grain prices with the volume of a political rally. A couple in the corner argues over how many fleas they counted in the bed upstairs. The goat, as usual, is back under the table being hand-fed by a child who insists it's his emotional support animal. The stew, it's filling. The ale, it flows freely, possibly too freely. Complaints about temperature, texture, or the suspicious chewiness of the meat are met with vague nods and no refunds. The innkeeper stands behind the counter, polishing a mug that hasn't been truly cleaned since last harvest, watching the whole scene with the calm of a man who's made peace with his fate. He knows what's coming. In an hour, someone will spill something. Someone else will pass out mid-sentence, and the bard will try again. He always tries again. But for now, the room is noisy, crowded, unpredictable, and alive, which, in a medieval inn, is basically the definition of success, as the last spoon clinks against the bottom of someone's bowl and the guests lean back in that universal posture of, "I have eaten too much and regret nothing." The real show begins. Evening entertainment. Now let's set expectations. There's no stage, no program, no lineup of talent, just people, noise, and the high likelihood that someone's going to walk away with a bruised ego or a lute string to the face. First up, of course, is the bard. Still here, still hopeful. He clears his throat, dramatically strums 3 hesitant notes, and announces, "A Ballad of the Fair Lady of Festerwell, who married a troll." Half the room cheers, the other half groans. The goat sneezes. He starts to sing. The lyrics occasionally rhyme. The tune changes every verse, but his enthusiasm unquestionable. He's pouring his soul into it like a man who truly believes this is his night to shine. At the bar, the innkeeper pours himself a mug of ale. Slowly, the way a man does when he knows there are still 6 more verses, and at least one of them involves sock theft. Meanwhile, at the far table, 2 old friends are locked in a riddle contest. The rules are unclear. One of the riddles might actually be a recipe. The other could be a threat. Either way, they're slurring and laughing, and it's oddly charming. A nearby monk has taken to humming psalms, not softly either. Loud, rhythmic, and with the energy of someone trying to out-holy the chaos. He occasionally mutters prayers at people mid-sentence. No one asks him to stop. The dice come out next. Old wooden chip, possibly blessed or cursed, depending who you ask. A small crowd forms. Bets are made. Coins clink. Someone wagers a very old pair. Someone else wagers a shoe. Nobody asks questions. Marjorie circles the room like a hawk with excellent peripheral vision. She's watching for trouble, spills, and anyone who looks like they're about to climb on a table. The bard attempts a dramatic flourish on a wobbly bench. She intercepts mid-step with a raised eyebrow. He backs down. Instantly, in the corner, a shy traveler pulls out a flute. He plays 3 soft, beautiful notes. The goat headbutts him. Applause. Evening entertainment at the inn isn't curated. It's not rehearsed. In fact, in some towns it's probably illegal, but it's real. It's chaotic. And more often than not, it ends with someone passed out, face first in their mug, or getting a new tattoo drawn in soot. It's not good entertainment. It's a live entertainment. Closing time. Sort of. There's no bell, no announcement, no official closing time. Closing time at a medieval inn is less of an event and more of a slow-motion collapse of civilization. It starts subtly. The bard forgets the words to his final verse and starts filling the gaps with throat noises and dramatic gestures. Someone throws a bread crust. Whether it's applause or a bribe to stop, unclear. Then come the slumps. Not from ale, partly from ale, but mostly from sheer exhaustion and the gravitational pull of stew-heavy bellies. One merchant leans so far back on his stool that he becomes part of the furniture. His companion uses him as a footrest. Marjorie begins stacking mugs, not gently, with purpose. She doesn't say anything, just raises one eyebrow. That's all it takes. In barmaid language, it means wrap it up or I'm bringing out the mop. There's always one guest there has to be who tries to order something after the fire's out and the kitchen's closed. Tonight, it's a peddler who asks for a light snack. He's handed a hunk of bread, a blank stare, and a strong suggestion to chew slowly and fall asleep sooner rather than later. The goat, ever present, ever smug, curls up by the embers. Technically, it's not allowed inside. Realistically, it's paid more attention to the entertainment than half the humans, so it gets a pass. The innkeeper does his final round, pokes at the hearth. Makes sure no one's face down in the stew pot again. Gently nudges a snoring traveler from a table to a bench, something he's become quite skilled at over the years. A couple stumbles upstairs, bumping into every visible surface. Tomorrow, they'll complain about how loud it was downstairs. The irony will be delicious. Eventually, the room empties, not all at once, but in waves. Cloaks, yawns, hiccups. One by one, the night claims them. The laughter fades. The chatter dies. The inn is quiet. Sort of. A mug rolls off a table. Someone upstairs drops a boot. The goat sighs. But for now, the worst is over. The guests are horizontal, mostly, and no one's actively talking. By medieval standards, that's bliss. Upstairs, where dreams go to die. Climbing the stairs in a medieval inn is a leap of faith. Not the religious kind, the structural kind. Each step groans like it's considering early retirement. Every third one shifts slightly under your foot. Some creak, some whine. All of them judge you. But eventually, you make it to the top. The rooms vary. Some are private if you're rich, or loud enough to convince people you're rich. Most, though, are dormitory-style shared spaces with rows of beds inches apart. You don't know the person next to you. You will by morning. The beds are wood frames filled with straw. If you're lucky, dry straw. If you're luckier, no movement inside the straw. The blankets scratchy, smelly, but warm enough if you don't ask questions. Pillows exist if you brought one. Otherwise, fold your cloak and pretend. Snoring starts immediately. Not cute, gentle snoring. Medieval snoring. The kind that echoes off wooden beams and makes you wonder if there's a warthog in the rafters. One guest tosses. Another talks in his sleep something about fish and unpaid taxes. A third hums a hymn through his nose, which is deeply unsettling. Privacy isn't a concept up here. You can pull your blanket over your head, but it only muffles the sound of someone loudly describing a dream involving goats and cheese. The chamber pot is there. It's full. It's everyone's problem. It's also currently someone's footrest. Until it's not. Someone wakes up and insists it's dawn. It's not. It's just extra dark. They step on someone's hand. Grumbles are exchanged. Everyone pretends to go back to sleep. Even Marjorie is in the back room, now trained to wake up at any sound that implies fire violence or unauthorized lute music. And the innkeeper, he's downstairs, slumped in a chair that's shaped exactly like his spine, half asleep, holding a half-finished mug, dreaming of silence. He won't get it, because in a medieval inn, sleep doesn't come in peaceful waves. It comes in short, sweaty, questionably hygienic shifts. But everyone's horizontal, and that counts as victory. There's a certain kind of light that sneaks in before dawn, murky, hesitant, like even the sun isn't sure it wants to commit to the day. That's when the inn begins to stir. Not gracefully, not quietly. More like a barn full of mildly sentient furniture suddenly realizing someone left the door open. The first sound, feet hitting the floor with all the enthusiasm of a man realizing he's late to regret. Someone groans loudly, like the act of waking up is a betrayal. Another guest immediately starts searching for his missing boot. It's on the hearth. How it got there, nobody knows. The goat might, but the goat isn't talking. The upstairs dormitory begins to empty in uneven waves. First to rise, the merchants, the monks, and anyone with a guilty conscience. They creep out of the room like fugitives, leaving behind a crime scene of tangled blankets, discarded cloaks, and one still sleeping traveler who's muttering defensively about cheese in his dreams. Downstairs, the innkeeper is already awake. Technically, his eyes are open. His body is upright. But his soul is still back in the chair he collapsed in 3 hours ago. He moves like a man wading through syrup, lifts a mug, sniffs it, puts it down, decides it's too early for whatever that was. Marjorie arrives moments later, shawl around her shoulders, apron on, hair tied back like she's about to go to war, which, in a way, she is. She doesn't speak. Not yet. First, she surveys the room with the quiet horror of someone doing triage after a very specific kind of disaster. One overturned stool, a missing candle. Someone inexplicably has smeared jam on the broom handle. She doesn't ask. She just picks it up, wipes it off, and moves on. Breakfast, take 2. The stew pot is never truly empty. It just transitions. Last night's mystery becomes this morning's breakfast. Marjorie adds water, salt, hope, begins to stir. She doesn't look in. She doesn't want to know. The guests trickle down one by one, each one bleary-eyed and freshly full of questions. Has anyone seen my satchel? Did I pay last night? Is this my goat? To each of these, Marjorie responds the same way, a slow blink, a flat-toned maybe, and an unspoken promise that further questions will be met with chores. The denials start shortly after. I didn't spill that ale. I wasn't the one snoring. I never said that about the monk's sandals. Marjorie does not reply. She just points to the ladle still stuck in someone's belt loop, or the half-eaten turnip jammed in their boot. The evidence is overwhelming. The shame mild and temporary. The bard reappears, of course, eyes glassy, hair a disaster. He declares that he has written a new verse about the night's events. He is handed a bowl of porridge and told to chew quietly. To everyone's relief, he does. The inn is now alive again. Stew bubbling, ale poured, mugs clinking, the occasional chicken wandering through like it owns the place. Breakfast in the medieval inn isn't grand, it's not elegant, but it's hot, vaguely edible, and nobody's passed out yet. By medieval standards, it's practically a royal banquet. Farewells, bartering, and one final goat chase. By the time the sun actually gets its act together and shines properly through the grimy windows, most of the guests are on their way out. Some pay in coin, others in trade. One offers a carved wooden spoon, another a dubious compliment about Marjorie's elbow structure. A few just mutter, "Thank you," and scurry out like they've remembered something embarrassing. And there's always that one traveler, the one who struts out, proudly convinced he was the highlight of the evening, and not, in fact, the reason 3 people slept under tables. The goat has once again been escorted outside. It tried to eat a lute string. It is unrepentant. Marjorie scraped something unidentifiable off a bench, her face blank, her movements precise. This is a woman who has reconsidered every life decision that led to this moment and found them all wanting. The common room is quiet now, not peaceful, just taking a breath. A few embers crackle in the hearth. The floor is sticky. One of the benches leans to the left, either from wear or quiet protest. The innkeeper stands behind the counter, holding his first full mug of ale for the day like it's a family heirloom. He looks around, takes it all in, the mess, the quiet, the faint smell of goat's onions and ambition. And as he does every morning, he mutters the same thing. Well, that wasn't too bad. It absolutely was. But optimism, he's found, helps with digestion. Outside, the village hums with early morning life. A cart rattles by its wheels, arguing with every cobblestone. A rooster announces its existence with the smug confidence of someone who's done absolutely no work, yet expects praise. Somewhere nearby, a blacksmith begins hammering metal with what feels like intentional disrespect for people nursing ale hangovers. And just like that, the world is awake again, which means, inevitably, so is the inn. The door creaks open. It always starts with one. A farmer steps in, dragging behind him a burlap sack that smells like vegetables and questionable decisions. He nods toward the bar, drops the sack near a stool, and mutters something about needing breakfast and somewhere to sit that doesn't wobble like a drunk on stilts. Right behind him is a woman, wrapped in a travel cloak, and the kind of polite smile that usually precedes a complaint about pricing. She scans the room like an auditor, eyes narrowing slightly at the crooked stool, the slightly burnt curtain, and the goat-shaped stain by the hearth. Then comes a knight, another one, or at least a man who thinks he's a knight. His helmet is dented, his tabard is stained, his voice definitely not made for indoor use. He declares loudly that he seeks a hearty meal in a room fit for a warrior. What he gets is stew bread and a bunk in the corner that may or may not creak in iambic pentameter. Marjorie doesn't flinch. She's seen this all before. She reties her apron. The innkeeper sets his mug down, and together, without a word exchanged, they prepare for another day of what can only be described as organized medieval absurdity. The inn's eternal truth. Here's the thing about a place like this inn. It doesn't change much. The stew remains mysterious. The bread remains weaponized. The guests remain unpredictable. And the goat one suspects, has a spare key. But that's the charm. That's the rhythm. It's not supposed to evolve. It's supposed to endure. Every day, A new wave of humanity crashes through the door, muddy, tired, hopeful, annoying, and every night they leave behind stories, some hilarious, some uncomfortable, a few too sticky to retell, and yet they come back. Because maybe there's something comforting about a place where your mistakes get swept up with the crumbs, where the stew doesn't ask questions and neither does the staff, where you can be slightly broken, slightly strange, and still be handed a mug and a bowl and told, sit, home for the night. The innkeeper knows this. So does Marjorie. And deep down, even the bard probably knows this, though he'll never admit it, not unless it rhymes. The inn isn't perfect. It leaks, it smells, it has opinions about your boots. But it runs because it has to, because it wants to, and because there will always be a need for one place in the world that welcomes everyone, even if they pay in buttons ask for almond milk or arrive with a goat wearing a ribbon. The morning has barely gotten its shoes on when the door creaks open again. This time, the figure standing there is clearly not from around here. He's clean, suspiciously so. Cloak-pressed boots, polished the kind of polish that says, "These have never touched mud." He steps inside, eyes narrowing at the lighting, the wood grain, the faint scent of goat and garlic. Then he does something dangerous. He clears his throat loudly. "Excuse me," he says, with the slow clarity of a man who assumes everyone around him is hard of thinking. "Do you serve vegan options?" Now, let's pause here. There is silence, the kind of silence that drops like a boulder into the stew pot of shared human experience. Someone by the hearth coughs into their mug. A chair creaks with indignation. The goat, who had just re-entered the room with all the confidence of someone who doesn't obey signage, freezes mid-chew. Marjorie doesn't blink. She just points at the pot. "It's turnip-based," she says. "Is it ethically sourced?" The man continues, oblivious to the fact that at least 3 patrons are now watching him like he's grown antlers. "It was ethically boiled," the innkeeper offers helpfully, "and no one's died from it this week, that we know of." The guest sighs dramatically and sits delicately on the one bench that tips if you shift your weight too far to the left. A mistake he'll discover in about 10 seconds. He eyes the daily parade of personalities. The inn doesn't wait for introductions. People come in waves, a merchant fingers stained with ink, muttering about inventory, a carpenter from the next village over here to barter nails for soup, a pair of young lovers pretending to be just traveling companions and doing a terrible job of it. Each arrival is a test. The inn watches them. Not the building exactly, but the atmosphere, the spirit of the place, like a dog that knows when someone's not a dog person. And this morning, the inn is amused. It sees the wealthy traveler trying not to let his cloak touch the floor, sees the monk who's back again, insisting he's fasting, but already eyeing the bread, sees the bard, yes, the third this week, tuning his instrument and preparing to ask if anyone wants to hear a ballad. They don't. The inn knows this, but the bard asks anyway. Breakfast theater. Breakfast in the medieval inn is not a meal. It's a performance. Marjorie weaves between tables, dropping bowls of hot pottage like a magician, throwing smoke bombs. She doesn't ask if it's enough. She knows it's not. That's not the point. The point is, it's hot, it's thick, and it's mostly turnips today. The bread makes a comeback. Still aggressive. Still structurally sound enough to be used in architecture. Guests attempt to soften it in their stew, which only results in awkward chewing noises and one bent spoon. One guest, possibly a returning offender, asks if there's anything else on the menu. "Yes," Marjorie replies. "You can have more stew." The ale flows because it has to, because the water is a gamble, and the tea is still just a myth whispered about by distant merchants. Even the children get a sip watered down and supervised, which in this place means someone looked at them sternly and said, "Don't throw the mug this time." At a nearby table, a pilgrim mutters blessings with each bite. A guard sharpens his knife during breakfast. The bard starts his song, gets exactly 3 words in before the goat sneezes directly onto his lute. Silence, then a slow clap. Even the monk nods approvingly. Marjorie's morning rounds. By now, Marjorie has entered her full tactical mode. She's balancing mugs on one hand, swatting at a wandering chicken with the other, and giving directions to a lost traveler, all while avoiding an enthusiastic barred foot that's bouncing dangerously close to her shin. She is grace, she is order, she is slightly annoyed. But that's the job. She refills mugs, replaces spoons, doles out bread with the flair of a stern aunt at a family gathering. She answers questions in 3 words or less. Do you have wine? It's reddish. Where's the chamber pot? Follow the smell. Is that goat? Yes, it's back. Guests try to engage her in conversation. She nods, politely, while walking away. The inn might belong to the innkeeper, but the floor, the room, the rhythm, that belongs to Marjorie. She doesn't enforce the rules. She is the rules. The inn settles briefly. By late morning, the breakfast wave has crashed and receded. Empty bowls sit like battlefield relics. Crumbs litter the floor. A single boot is left near the hearth. No one's claiming it, and that worries everyone more than if they had. The bard is tuning his lute again, hoping for a round 2. He won't get it. The goat has resumed its position under table 3. And Marjorie, she takes exactly 3 minutes to stand still, just long enough to sip what might be the first hot ale she's had in 2 days. The inn breathes, not deeply, not safely, but enough. It knows the day isn't over, that lunch is coming, that someone will ask if the stew tastes different, and someone else will find a hair that might be theirs, that a child will cry, that someone will suggest a card game and lose their boots over it. But for now, there is quiet, which is as good as it gets. The thing about a medieval inn is that quiet never lasts. It lingers, teases, hangs in the air just long enough for someone to notice, and then, like clockwork, it's shattered by something like a goat, slipping on a tile, or a bard tripping over a stool that absolutely wasn't there 10 seconds ago. But in that thin sliver of calm before lunch, the inn takes a breath. Marjorie wipes down a table with a cloth so stained it may qualify as a historical artifact. The innkeeper checks the stew pot, pokes at one side deeply, and adds a splash of something that could be water broth or weak ale. No one's really sure. A child chases a chicken across the common room. No one stops them. There's a rhythm to the place, a cycle. The tables are reset, the mugs are restacked, the fire is stoked. There's no checklist, no printed schedule, just a silent understanding between the innkeeper and Marjorie that, like it or not, round 2 is coming, and they will not be ready. But they will be there. The triangle rings again. Marjorie doesn't need to yell. She just walks to the battered iron triangle that hangs near the hearth, picks up the mallet, and gives it a single clang. Lunch is served. The noise begins immediately. Chairs scrape, boots stomp. A spoon hits the ground before anyone's even sat down. Guests pour in from upstairs, from outside, from corners that defy the laws of spatial logic. The same man who claimed to be just resting his eyes now demands stew with the urgency of a man on the brink of starvation. A traitor leaps over a stool. A bard swings his lute like a weapon. 2 farmers argue about who arrived first, despite having sat down simultaneously. The innkeeper starts ladling stew hearty beige and unapologetically vague. This isn't food, it's momentum. Pottage the sequel. The stew today is different, or maybe not. Maybe it's exactly the same as yesterday, only warmer. Maybe it's just the memory of a stew that once had ingredients, now clinging to life through repetition and salt. One guest leans over his bowl and mutters, "What's in this?" The innkeeper doesn't look up. Wisdom. Someone else asks if it's vegetarian. Marjorie pauses. It's edible. That's as close to confirmation as anyone's getting. Bread arrives with a thunk, still hard, still questionably chewable. A few brave souls attempt to dip it in their stew again. One succeeds. One loses their bread entirely to the bowl. One cracks a tooth and smiles through it. That's the spirit. Chaos served hot. By mid-lunch, the inn is a full-blown symphony of clinking, chewing, arguing, and something that sounds suspiciously like a small fight over pickled onions. A pair of guards near the fire are having a burping contest. The monk is reciting proverbs between bites. The bard launches into another tune, this time a rousing jig titled The Widow of Wobbly Bench. No one knows what it means. No one asks him to stop. They just talk louder. A child is crawling under tables. A different child is throwing crumbs at the goat, who is now wearing a makeshift paper crown and seems perfectly okay with it. Marjorie floats through it all, one hand balancing mugs, the other blocking a hand that gets a little too bold. She delivers food, delivers threats, delivers quiet glares that could cut granite. The guests see her coming and part like she's Moses with soup. The innkeeper behind the bar tries to count how many mugs have gone missing today. He stops at 7 and pretends it's a normal number. Lunch wanes, but doesn't end. Lunch lasts until the room decides it's tired. People slow down. Chewing becomes reflective. The stew cools, congeals. Alley mugs sit half full and abandoned. One guest leans on the table, eyes unfocused, hands still clutching bread like it's a flotation device. Another stares into their bowl as if the secrets of the universe are at the bottom. They're not. It's a turnip. Again. The goat curls up under a bench and sighs, and then suddenly quiet. Not full silence. That doesn't exist here. But the kind of pause where the only noise is someone trying to remember where they left their spoon and someone else whispering, "I think I'm full," like it's a confession. Marjorie takes her chance. She begins collecting dishes with the precision of a trained soldier sweeping a minefield. The bard starts humming again softly, this time as if testing the waters. The innkeeper raises a hand without looking up. The humming stops. A breath before the sweep. Marjorie stacks bowls, balances mugs, dodges a rogue chicken. She's fast, efficient, dangerously calm. One guest asks if there's dessert. She just stares. They get the message. The floor, once semi-visible, is now a minefield of crumbs, onion skins, a bent fork, and a piece of someone's belt. The innkeeper eyes the mess, sighs, and reaches for the broom. He knows what's next. It's not elegant. It's not satisfying. It's certainly not effective. But it's tradition, because cleaning up after a medieval lunch is less about sanitation and more about survival. And no matter how many bowls are cleared, mugs are rinsed, or goats are re-evicted, they know it's only a matter of time before someone says those 5 terrible words. So, what's for dinner? Lunch may be over, but the real work is just beginning. The room in the cold light of post-meal reality resembles less of a dining space and more of a medieval excavation site. If you handed this mess to a team of archaeologists, they'd start cataloging it by century. Marjorie doesn't blink. She's already moving, scraping, stacking, wiping. The tables are sticky. Not forgot to wipe it down sticky, more like this table is evolving into a new life form sticky. She uses the same cloth as always, the one that's seen too much. At this point, it doesn't clean. It just redistributes history. The innkeeper does his part, sort of. He drags a bucket to the center of the room, stirs the leftover stew in a pot, and mutters something about just warming it up for pigs. But everyone knows pigs aren't that picky, and neither are tomorrow's guests. The floor is lava and breadcrumbs. Sweeping the floor is a process, not a fast one, more of a philosophy. Step 1, identify large objects. A ladle, a spoon, a piece of someone's shoe. Step 2, ignore smaller items until they form a critical mass. Step 3, shove it all under the benches and pretend gravity will handle the rest. There are layers of dirt crumbs and emotional debris. Some of it's old, some of it is from 10 minutes ago. One guest left behind a glove filled with what may be jam. No one claims it. It is added to the pile behind the bar, possibly belongs to someone. Current inventory: 1 boot, 2 unmatched gloves, 3 spoons, and a very small hat with suspicious bite marks. The lingering guests. Not everyone leaves after lunch. Some stay, some linger, some look like they're waiting for dessert. There is no dessert. There is stew. There is always stew. Marjorie has explained this multiple times, and yet the questions return. One man leans back on his stool like he owns the place. He does not. His ale tab says otherwise. Another guest is gently snoring into the crook of their elbow. This would be fine, except they're at the center table and someone wants to use their mug. Marjorie gives them the look. The snoring stops. The great mug rinse. The mugs are collected, not washed. Not really. The process is simple. Stack them. Take them outside. Dunk them in the rain barrel. Swirl. Hope for the best. There is a bucket for soaking, but it's ceremonial now. More of a statement piece. The innkeeper holds one up to the light, squints, and mutters, "Hey, still usable." He puts it back on the shelf. Cleanliness is relative, especially when the alternative is explaining why there's only one mug and 12 angry patrons. The room begins to reset. The benches are realigned, roughly. They never sit straight. One wobbles another list to the left like it's seasick. It's fine. People drink enough ale they won't notice. Or if they do, they'll blame the stew. A child returns claiming he lost his dice under a table. He finds a spoon instead, claims it's lucky, takes it. Marjorie doesn't stop him. She's seen worse things taken. She's served worse things. One moment of stillness. Eventually the room is presentable, not clean, not fresh, but ready. The way a tired soldier is ready, the way a mule is ready to pull another cart. The hearth crackles. A new pot of stew is already on the fire, because of course it is. The innkeeper stands behind the bar again, his hands cradling a mug like it holds secrets or peace, or possibly the energy to keep doing this until sundown. He takes a sip, grimaces, adds ale. Better! Marjorie walks past, apron streaked with whatever lunch decided to become hair pulled back tighter than her patience. She says nothing. He says nothing. They share a glance, a nod, an understanding. The tables are set. The fire is warm. The door is closed, but not for long. Because this is a medieval inn, and supper's coming. Supper doesn't arrive with dignity. It doesn't glide into the room on silver trays announced by trumpets and reverent hush. No supper at the medieval inn arrives the way a thunderstorm does, loud, messy, and with the quiet promise that someone's going to get wet. Someone's going to get angry, and someone's going to cry into a bowl of turnips. It begins with sound. Boots stomping, benches screeching, a man clearing his throat so aggressively it sounds like he's about to perform surgery with a song. Guests trickle in, then rush in. The pilgrims come first, always hungry, always convinced they haven't eaten in days, even if they were here for lunch. Then the guards, loud, boastful smelling of sweat and fermented regrets. One slaps the doorframe like it owes him money. Another starts a dice game before sitting down. The bard is back, not the morning one, a new one, same worn loot, same misplaced confidence. He hasn't even removed his traveling cloak before launching into a ballad titled Ode to a Lady and the Mysterious Gravy. Marjorie doesn't even blink. She disappears into the kitchen. Tonight's special stew. The menu is simple. It's stew. It's always stew. Tonight's version is different, but only because someone added too much salt and not enough explanation. There's something chewy in it. Might be barley, might be onion, might be yesterday's chewy thing reheated and given a new purpose. Bread is served alongside it again, not so much a side as a challenge. One guest taps their piece against the table. It doesn't break. The table does. Marjorie returns carrying a pot that's technically steaming. She begins the ladling process, each scoop delivered with the same expression of, "I warned you." A traveler takes a bite, chews, stops. This stew tastes different than last night. Marjorie, without breaking eye contact, replies, "It's the same stew." "Oh, well." It's nice, the traveler adds quickly as if trying to convince the stew not to take offense. The supper crowd gathers. The room is full now, full of stew, full of people, full of conflicting body odors and passive-aggressive muttering. Near the hearth, a trio of merchants are debating grain prices so loudly it sounds like a duel might break out over flour. In the far corner, a couple is fighting in low, whispered tones about how many fleas were in the bed upstairs. Answer too many. The goat is back, of course, wearing what appears to be a braided napkin around its neck like a scarf. No one knows who dressed it. The child under table 2 is feeding it again. It's my goat, he insists. It is no one's goat, Marjorie replies firmly, but the goat stays. Entertainment optional, chaos guaranteed. The bard, still strumming, asks if the room would like to hear a song about betrayal and beans. No one answers. So naturally he begins. He gets one verse in before Marjorie places a ladle in his stew bowl with just enough force to make it slosh onto the table. He gets the message. Still, there's no silence. Silence never survives supper. Someone knocks over a mug. Someone else blames the stew for a marital dispute. A group near the window is debating the moral weight of borrowing a horse indefinitely. The innkeeper watches all this from his post behind the bar, polishing a mug that will never be clean, listening, occasionally raising an eyebrow, waiting for the one guest who always without fail spills ale on his lap. It happens every night. But it's alive. The room is loud. It's imperfect. It smells like turnips and feet and burnt ambition, and yet it's alive. People are eating, laughing occasionally, drinking often, and somewhere in the center of it all, the stew keeps bubbling, the ale keeps pouring, and the goat keeps trying to get into the bar. Marjorie intercepts it like a knight in an apron. The bard tunes his lute again as if anyone asked. The merchants are now arguing over who paid last time. A spoon hits the floor. A bench wobbles ominously, and the innkeeper leans on the bar watching it all unfold. This is not luxury. It's not elegance. It's not even that clean. But it's his, and in a world full of mud-plagued taxes and unpredictable poultry, that counts for something. Supper doesn't end with dessert, because there is no dessert. There's stew, there's ale, and if you're lucky, there's a piece of bread that didn't chip your tooth. That's the closest anyone gets to a sweet course. But when the last few spoonfuls are gulped and the bowls are pushed aside, when the conversation dips just below a roar and the mugs are half drained, something shifts. The schemes begin, not loudly, not all at once, but in glances, whispers, carefully folded maps, finger taps on wood in quiet code. Medieval inns are many things, but at this hour, they're also headquarters for bad ideas with great enthusiasm. At one table, mercenaries pretending not to be mercenaries are casually discussing road tolls, sword polish, and which nobleman definitely deserves a lesson in humility. Someone mentions a shipment due north. Someone else chuckles. It's not funny, but everyone laughs. No one explains. At the window seat, a man with too many rings and not enough teeth is trying to sell something from inside his cloak. It might be jewelry. It might be pickled ears. It's unclear, and he likes it that way. By the fire, two travelers are drawing a map in spilled ale, arguing about the location of a cave that either holds treasure curses or both. A third traveler offers to guide them. He has no idea what cave they're talking about, but he does have a torch and confidence. The game table emerges. Every inn has one. Not an actual table, usually just the table. The one with the warped edge, the slightly blood-stained corner, the groove where a dagger once landed. Tonight, it's home to dice. Rattling, clicking, bouncing dice. One man wagers a chicken. Another throws in an IOU, signed by Sir Bartholomew, who may or may not exist. A woman bets a lock of hair tied with red string. Everyone pretends that's not strange. Rules are flexible. There's a vague sense of fairness, enforced mostly by Marjorie's sudden appearances whenever voices get too loud or someone tries to adjust a die mid-roll. The stakes are low until they're not. A mug is slammed. A coin clinks. A whisper, double or nothing. Tension rises. Then the goat sneezes on the dice. Debate ensues. Goat interference fair or foul? The answer depends on who was winning. Tails begin to stretch. With bellies full and ale levels dangerously low, the stories start. At first, they're grounded. Last winter, I survived a snowstorm with only a cloak and a frozen carrot. Once I outran 6 bandits on a donkey named Beatrice. Back in '03, the old '03, my uncle fell in love with a ghost. Twice. But as the mug's empty, the truth unravels like a poorly tied boot. Soon, every tale involves dragon seduction and at least one unexpected turnip. A man claims he once arm-wrestled a troll and won her heart. Another says he kissed a witch and woke up with 3 wives. None of them were his. The monk drinks silently, but then quietly he adds, I once saw a man swallow a candle. No one speaks for a moment. Someone claps. The innkeeper's watch. The innkeeper stands behind the bar watching it all like a tired god surveying a world of his own making. He doesn't speak much. He doesn't need to. His eyebrows do most of the work. Raised. Really. Lowered. You sure about that? Slight twitch. I'm about to charge you extra for that lie. Behind him, shelves sag under the weight of clay mugs, stale biscuits, and emotional baggage. He wipes a mug with a cloth so old it may predate civilization. Every so often he checks the door not for intruders but for late arrivals. There's always one. The kind who comes in well after dark, cloaked in mystery eyes glowing with secrets. Or maybe it's just bad lighting. Either way, the door will creak open. He knows it. So does the goat. Marjorie's night patrol. Marjorie doesn't sit. She glides. She materializes. She appears beside tables, behind chairs, beneath arguments. She carries a tray like a weapon and wears her apron like armor. She doesn't smile. She doesn't need to. She has a look, a very specific look, the one that says, you have 5 seconds to rethink that sentence before I rethink your teeth. She replaces mugs, refills bowls, smacks hands reaching for what's clearly not theirs. She retrieves a lute from the goat's mouth. She returns a hat to a man who insists it was never off his head. She pulls a pickpocket by the ear until he apologizes to the table. And when a guest asks if she's ever considered another profession, she simply says, this is the other profession, the inn at its most itself. This is the hour when the fire's at its warmest, when the laughter is half real and half forgetting, when the bard sings a song that finally lands soft low about someone who left long ago. No one claps. They just listen. It doesn't last long, but it doesn't have to, because this is the soul of the inn, not the stew, not the ale, not even the goat, but this, the stories, the schemes, the noise, and the quiet right after, where for just a moment, in a world of mud and taxes and aching feet, everyone feels like they belong, even if they'll be gone by morning. Every inn has its ghost hour. It's not about spirits, though. Some guests will insist otherwise, especially after their 4th mug of herbal ale. No, the ghost hour comes after the noise, after the dice games end, after the schemes are packed away in travel cloaks and underhand glances. It's the in-between time. Not quite night, not quite sleep. Just quiet enough to hear things you usually ignore. A stool creaks for no reason. The wind whistles through a crack in the wall. The embers in the hearth shift with a soft sigh like they've just remembered something painful. And in this strange silence, things happen. Small things, honest things. Conversations you'll only hear ends. In the far corner, 2 travelers speak in hushed tones. Not lovers, not friends, strangers. But tonight, over the shared exhaustion of cheap ale and mutual disillusionment, they talk about regrets, about roads not taken and towns that smell like fish. One says he used to be a poet. The other says he used to be married. Neither is sure which is worse. At the fire, a young boy with soot on his cheeks and no boots asks the bard if he really knows all the songs he sings. The bard doesn't answer right away. Then he says, I only remember the ones that hurt. The innkeeper closes the ledger. He never balances the books because the books never balance. There are too many IOUs, too many trades, too many I'll pay next time, as written in hopeful handwriting and soaked with ale. He just closes the ledger, not with satisfaction, but with the solemn dignity of a man who knows you can't argue with math, but you can't ignore it until after breakfast. He blows out the lantern behind the bar, but not the one by the door. That one stays lit. In case of stragglers or fate. Marjorie's still moving, while others settle. Marjorie moves. She wipes, she stacks, she mutters. Not curses. Those are for daytime. These are different. Quiet words. Words only the mugs understand. She checks the doors, locks the windows, double-checks the pantry. She finds a child asleep under a table and covers them with a rag that used to be a curtain and is now officially a blanket. She finds the goat asleep in the corner. Doesn't move it. Won't bother. She's lost more battles to that goat than she cares to count. Instead, she steps outside for a moment. Just a moment. The night air is sharp. The stars distant. She breathes. And for the first time all day, no one is asking her anything. It's the closest thing she has to peace. One last guest. The door creaks open. Because of course it does. A silhouette stands there, hood-up cloak, wet boots muddy. Doesn't speak. The innkeeper gestures to the hearth. The figure nods. No questions. No name. Just a nod and a seat. Marjorie slides a bowl of stew across the table. Wordless. Mechanical. Almost ritualistic. The figure eats. No compliments. No complaints. That's how you know they've traveled far. The inn doesn't ask where they came from. The inn doesn't need to. It just folds them into its rhythm, and the night breathes again. The last light. The fire dims. The mugs are empty. The bard hums something old and shapeless just for himself. Someone cries softly in their sleep. Someone else snores like they're sawing a cathedral in half. Marjorie extinguishes the last lantern. The innkeeper puts the ledger on the shelf. And for the first time in hours, the inn is still. Not dead, not silent. Just still. Because tomorrow it starts again. Because there will always be more stew, more stories, more regrets, more goats. But for now, just for now, the medieval inn sleeps. Long before the rooster dares to crow, the inn stirs. Not with noise, not yet, but with tension. The kind you feel in the air when something is about to begin, or when something forgot to end. There are footsteps on the stairs, careful ones, the kind that try not to wake the world. A traveler sneaks down, cloak and hand boots tied quietly. He moves like a man who wants to disappear before anyone remembers his name or his unpaid tab. But Marjorie is already awake. She doesn't stop him, not with words. She simply stands at the bottom of the stairs, arms crossed, holding a mug of something dark and steaming and judging. He stops. He sighs. He reaches into his satchel and pulls out a coin, a trinket, a smooth stone carved with a symbol no one understands. He holds them out. Marjorie takes the trinket. He nods and walks out the door. It's unclear if he paid his debt. It's even less clear if he'll remember this place tomorrow. But the inn remembers him. Reckoning the Marjorie way, the reckoning doesn't happen all at once. It's slow, relentless, like a cat deciding which part of you to judge first. Marjorie begins her morning rounds before the sun even yawns. She inspects mugs, rearranges spoons and notes with cold precision, which benches survived the night and which now have a wobble that wasn't there before. There's a list in her head, a sacred scroll of chaos caused. One cracked plate barred, 2 muddy footprints on the stairs, unsupervised. Merchant, 1 curtain torn in half. Goat child, both. An unidentifiable smell in bunk 3. No one speaks of bunk 3. She'll fix what can be fixed. She'll ignore what can't. And everything else. She adds to the inn's growing collection of character. Morning guests, the groggy and the guilty. They start to appear around the edges of dawn, bleary-eyed, rumpled, blinking like owls who fell asleep in their boots. The first guest down is always the one who slept the worst. Shirt inside out, hair sideways, a face that says, "I dreamed about stew, and I hate what it told me." He asks for tea. Marjorie raises an eyebrow. He switches to ale. The next is a pilgrim, clutching their staff and muttering about visions. Whether divine or digestive, no one's sure. She gets porridge and a warning not to speak to the goat. Then comes the couple who swore they were just traveling companions. They won't look at each other. One has a shoe missing. The other pretends to read a menu that doesn't exist. The innkeeper watches them all from his usual perch, mug in hand, ledger open, a faint smile tugging at one corner of his mouth like he's watching a play he's seen 100 times, but still enjoys. The goat's morning routine. And then there's the goat. Fresh, bright-eyed, tail twitching with energy unearned. It jumps on a bench. It inspects the hearth. It headbutts a barrel just to remind the barrel who's in charge. One guest tries to shoo it out. The goat headbutts them. They leave. The goat stays. No one argues. The child from the night before emerges from under a table still asleep, possibly dreaming of breadcrumbs and bard songs. The goat curls up beside them like a guard dog with horns. This is normal. This is fine. This is how it is. Before the breakfast bell, there's a moment, a rare, precious moment, where the inn is both full and quiet. Guests whisper, fire crackles. Marjorie ladles the first scoop of what will become breakfast stew. It is identical to dinner stew, only judged less harshly by groggy taste buds. The bard still here, still unpaid, tunes his lute softly. He hasn't spoken yet, which is suspicious. Outside, the sky bruises pink. The road glows faintly with mist. The rooster somewhere far off is preparing its first scream of the day, and the inn, it waits, not with dread, not with excitement, but with the calm of a building that has seen it all and knows it's about to see it again. The rooster doesn't crow, it screams, not melodically, not rhythmically, just a raw, spiteful blast of poultry fury that signals the official start of the day whether anyone likes it or not. Inside the inn, a floorboard creaks so loudly it might be filing a formal complaint. A guest groans. Another pulls a pillow over their head. Someone mumbles something about rooster stew, but Marjorie is already moving. The fire is hot. The stew is ready. The mugs are out. It's breakfast, or at least it's what this place calls breakfast. Stew again, but different. Today's breakfast stew has potential. There's something new in it, a bit of green, maybe a leaf, maybe an herb, maybe a mistake. Marjorie ladles it without explanation. The first guest to try it stares into their bowl like they're searching for omens. It's refreshing, they lie. A second guest finds a carrot slice shaped vaguely like a heart. They take this as a sign. They propose marriage to their stew companion. She declines, but gently. The innkeeper sips his mug and mutters, "Too much time." Marjorie says nothing, but she adds more salt. That usually ends the debates. Mornings are for regrets. The morning guests sit with the haunted looks of people who remember last night and wish they didn't. Someone apologizes to Marjorie. She doesn't say what for. She simply replies, "Accepted." This time, at the back table, a man takes out a scroll and begins writing a letter to someone named Elspeth. He crosses it out, tries again, and again. By the fourth try, it just says, "I was wrong. I'm sorry. The stew was better than I deserved." A monk at the bar finishes his porridge and says nothing for 15 full minutes. Then he simply mutters, "Today I start over," and leaves 5 coins without making eye contact. The inn swallows all of it. It doesn't judge. It just keeps feeding. Packing up the stories. One by one, guests begin to leave. The merchant tightens their cloak, counts their coins, and mutters about prices in the next town. The guard complains about his sore back, blames the bunk, then quietly pockets a spoon he insists is just a backup. The bard lingers. Of course he does. He offers to sing one last song in exchange for breakfast. Marjorie stares him down. He sings anyway. It's a soft song about dusty roads and quiet promises, and ends with soup that tastes like home, even when nothing else does. Someone claps. It's the child. The goat sneezes. The inn never empties. It just rearranges. As some leave, others arrive. A courier with tired eyes. A couple arguing in the doorway about whether they're lost. A silent man with a covered cart who pays an exact coin and says nothing but "room, please." There's no check-in process. Just eye contact, a nod, and the quiet understanding that if you're here, you need rest. The innkeeper gives them a key. Marjorie shows them to a table. The stew arrives before their coats are off. The cycle never stops. It just resets. New faces. Same fire. Different stories told with the same exhaustion and the same hope that tomorrow might somehow be a little less complicated. Or a place between worlds. That's what the inn is. Not home, not quiet, not the road either. It's the pause, the breath, the place between, where travelers rest and rethink, where secrets are half told and lies are kindly believed, where bards heal and goats reign, where stew is salvation, punishment, mystery, and nourishment all in one. And as Marjorie wipes down a table for the 6th time that morning, she doesn't smile, but her shoulders relax, because the inn still stands. The mugs still clink, and outside the rooster prepares to scream again tomorrow. If you asked anyone where the inn was, they'd shrug. It's on the way, they'd say. Between towns, between troubles, between who you were when you left and who you might be when you arrive. It has no name, no sign, but somehow people always find it just when they need to. Maybe it isn't on any map, because maps are made for destinations, and the inn was never meant to be one. It's a pause, a glitch in the journey, a place that lets you fall apart quietly while pretending you haven't. Because sometimes you don't need a solution. You just need somewhere to sit, somewhere to choose something unidentifiable, and somewhere to remember who you were before the world started asking too much of you. Marjorie's real job. Marjorie isn't just a server. She's a sentinel, a keeper of secrets, a quiet witness to 1,000 breakdowns disguised as ale orders. She's patched travelers argued with nobility, kicked out thieves, and bandaged their victims sometimes in the same hour. She doesn't write anything down, but she remembers everything. Not the names, those fade, but the faces. She remembers the way someone grips their spoon when they're hiding guilt, the way they fidget when they're carrying news they don't want to deliver, the way they smile like it might be their last. She remembers because someone has to, because there's no bard for the broken-hearted merchants, no statue for the runaway lovers who never made it past the river, no songs about the pilgrim who realized halfway through his journey that he was praying to the wrong god. Only Marjorie, and she carries them all, quietly, steadily, like plates that don't wobble even when the table does. The innkeeper, the flamekeeper, he's not just the owner. He's the flamekeeper, not just of the hearth, but of the rhythm, of the ridiculous, impossible balance that keeps this place alive. He knows when to raise the prices just enough to pay for a new roof, but not enough to scare off the poor wanderer who only has buttons and a half-truth in his pouch. He knows when to let the bard sleep on the floor and when to kick him out for 3 days until he writes something new. He knows how many mugs can go missing before he starts charging by the handle. And more importantly, he knows when someone is about to leave forever. They always look back at the door like it might forgive them. He never says goodbye. He just nods, as if to say, "We saw you, we won't forget." Legends are built here, not grand ones, not the kind sung in courts or painted on church ceilings, but smaller ones. A man who left his wedding to become a mushroom farmer, a child who came with no name and left with 3, a woman who drank 2 mugs of fire brew, swore off love, and married a knight 3 days later after saving him from a duck. They're not famous stories, but they're real, and in the grand scheme of things, they matter more than the wars, because they're the ones lived, not performed, not rewritten, just lived. And this inn, it holds them all, in the walls, in the wobble of the stairs, in the ever-present smell of onion stew and unspoken sorrow. You'll come back. You won't mean to. You'll say it was just a stop. You'll leave full of plans and purpose, and maybe they'll carry you. Maybe you'll get what you wanted. But one day, on a different road, in a different life, you'll smell stew, hear a lute, feel the wind shift, and there it'll be, the door, the triangle bell, the goat You'll step inside blinking at the familiarity, half believing it's a dream. But Marjorie will look up. She won't smile, but she'll nod. And the innkeeper will pour a mug without asking what you've been through. Because it doesn't matter. You made it back. And here, that's enough.